Hello, Melanie.
Hey, Katrina, how are you?
I am good. I am good. So, Pastor Aubrey will not be with us today. Um, he is traveling. So, um, this it's going to be you and I discussing our topic on good boundaries and goodbye. So, how have you been this week?
This week has been very good. I have a lot of self-reflection because the more that I read this book, it is just helping me really reflect on myself and I had to look at some things to see is like, oh, is there a boundary required or is it a change of action on my part?
Ah,
And so there's a few things where I had to make some changes on myself, and a boundary was not required. So it's been good. And how about
okay.
you?
That's actually good acknowledgement, right? For even for our viewers to understand that boundaries doesn't always mean that you have to set the boundaries with the other person, but it means you have to take a deep introspective look of what you got going on with you.
Hmm.
So I like the fact that you are taking the book and you're doing a self reflection, self evaluation. And that's what we want to encourage everybody to do as you're going through. Actually, I mean, when we're making a change, the truth of the matter is the only thing that we can change is ourselves.
Yes.
Right. So I like that.
And how was your week?
My week has been pretty good, busy nonetheless, but good. I told someone earlier this week I kind of feel like I'm in a matrix.
Okay.
And the reason why I say I feel like I'm in a matrix, I feel like everything is just going slow. Um, but I think it probably has more to do with me speeding up and being more clear about things.
Okay.
So I guess I'm Neo.
Okay.
But it's been good. It's been good. It's But so when it comes to boundaries, I take it you are really enjoying this book.
Oh yes, I love. When I say I love the book, I'm actually doing it with a small group with an individual, and we are on the first chapter, and both of us are really excited. So
Okay. Well, Sharon put on here what's the name of the book? Good Boundaries and Goodbyes by Lisa Turkhurst.
yes,
So, Sharon, we definitely invite you guys to read the book and join in with the discussion from what you are learning from the book. Um, but today we're going to be talking about levels of access,
yes,
right? So, just I think the chapter that we're talking about really is naming the tension that we've all been wrestling with, right? Because truth of the matter is, when it comes to relationships, things are not always smooth, right? They're not always honky dory and great. There's some tension in relationships. And like you said, sometimes those that tension requires you to take an evaluation on the relationship and identify whether or not you have healthy boundaries, or do the self reflection and identify what it is that you need to communicate or change within those relationships that might be causing some tension, right?
yes.
Because what do we know about tension? What's a problem with tension?
There, when you stretch too much, it breaks.
Too much tension can eventually cause a break. And the
Yes,
last thing you want to do is emotionally break down.
yes.
All right. So go ahead, Melanie, as it relates to the topic, the first topic I think that we want to really break down and have a discussion on. Well, you identified the three words we are going to discuss: access, responsibility, and consequences, right?
Yes.
So let's talk about access. What is your definition of access? What do you see? access being as it relates to relationships?
Access. Ooh, I'm having feedback here. So access for me is giving people permission to certain areas in my life. Giving people like access to my information, access to my secrets, access to my hurt or my pain. So access to conversation. Sometimes I could say something to a person, and some people I can say certain things to and just open up about what's really going on with me. I have some friends that I could just share, like what's really going on, not on the surface level, but a deep level. Other people, I cannot share that type of information. So it's access to my feelings. Um, so that's how I view, what kind of access to my time. Sometimes people can just waste your time. So that's how I view access.
Yeah. And I think what you're identifying too is that if I'm going to give somebody access, I need to trust them. It's like if I'm going to give my neighbor my house key, and I think she mentions that, uses that as an example, right, in the book.
Hmm.
I'm going to give my neighbor my access to my home when I'm out of town and I'm not going to be there to look over my home. I need to have some level of trust in order to
Yes.
give them access. And she talk in the book, she talks about levels of access and understanding
Access.
what they are. So let's talk about levels of access. Melanie, what did you take away from this book when it comes to her talking about levels of access?
One of the things it is like she brought out, some things we have good boundaries. We set those out. Like if somebody and if you ask me for my social security number, even if it is if it is a place that I know is legitimate, I'm like, I may give you my last four, but I'm gonna have to be in person to give you all of them. So I would not give like access to my banking information. I would not give access to my social security. So those for me are I can give it to my husband because that's a level of access. But other things, when we look at level of access, and one of the things that she talked about when we say level of access, it is I am giving you that closeness. I'm giving you insights to my feelings. I am telling you how I feel. I'm telling you my thoughts. And so it may be like a level 10. We can go from 10 to 1. I can give you a level 10 access, but you treat that level 10 access, you're only responsible at a level 3. So that means, for example, going back, my mother, when we were younger, my mother, and back in the days where you used to be able to give your children your credit card and they could use it. So my mother had given my younger sister her credit card to go school shopping. So my younger sister came back. I remember I think she had a pair of jeans and two blouses. And it came up to like $115 or something like that. And mom was like, take that stuff back. And she never gave her the credit card again. So mom had given her a level 10 access to her credit card, but she used it at a level 2. So
Mm.
mom had to return the stuff and then not give her credit card again. Now, on the other hand, and I witnessed this, right? So on the other hand, when it was time for me to purchase my prom dress, graduation, all that stuff, I saw that. So when she gave me the credit card, I was like, because I don't want to take anything back. So I was able to get my prom dress, my graduation dress, and shoes all for like $65. And mom was like, well, how much did you spend? I said, about 65. She was like, I wasn't saying that low. You could have done a little, but she was then able to trust me with that level 10 access to her credit card. So that's the same thing with that scenario as it is with relationships.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
you're absolutely right. I do hear the feedback that you were talking about. I think when it comes to a level of access, um, and relationships, when we tell people secrets and that stuff comes back to us, right? Things that maybe some of our innermost feelings, what I'm struggling with, right? And then all of a sudden we hear it somewhere else and like, oh, how did you know that? I didn't tell you that. I only told one person, right? And
Mhm.
so when that happens, that is a reminder or a a warning that we may have given someone too much access. However, I think it's also important for us to communicate communicate what our expectations are when it comes to giving levels of access, right? Because one of the things that Lisa Tykehurst, she had her therapist Jim, right? She always at the end of the book she has Jim give some gems, right? He dropped some gems, some insight. But one of the things that he said, and I think this is important, if you don't have clear rules and you don't set boundaries, then you will be ruled by the other person and you may not even know it. So if we are setting boundaries, but they're unspoken, we have these unspoken expectations, unspoken boundaries, we started the relationship off wrong,
Right,
right? We haven't communicated our boundaries. So I think it's important as we are um, identifying how we give access, the levels of access, we need to also make sure that we are effectively communicating because that's going to be the key. We got to be able to
right,
communicate that we what our boundaries are. Um, and here's the thing: when I communicate my boundaries, once I've communicated that to you, and then you violate it, and I think that's one of the things that they're talking about is when those violations those happen in our relationships, then we've given we've given that person absolutely too much access. So
right. And so for me, my thing is, okay, we say we need to set boundaries. We need to check to see if it's an issue with me, and we find out that it's not an issue with me. But some of those indicators to say, okay, how do I know when I need to set a boundary? Because when things get to the point when I'm feeling like, you know what, I can't take this relationship anymore. No, I can't deal with this. This is the, you know, when I'm with this friend or when I'm with this family member, it the worst of me come out.
uh-huh.
And so as I look at those things, it's like there's something when we're dealing with relationships, it's like, okay, there is something that has to change. And I'm feeling those things inside is like, okay, I can't take this no more. It's something that's have to change, and I'm just not gonna be able to do it.
Oh yeah, I love the way when you talk about that hurt. One of the examples that she uses the beach, right? Stepping on spurs at the beach. And so for me, I
Hmm.
could resonate with that because I love the beach. There's nothing like blue water, clean water, just sand in your toes when you're walking along the beach. I love that. But when you step on a spur, then you begin to get cautious about where you're walking at the beach. So you can't necessarily pay attention to the beauty that's surrounding you, right? And so as she was identifying that, I saw it as okay, my relationship. I love the relationship I have with these people. I like the fact that we talk and we can hang out. But then I start to feel pain, and then if I keep stepping on spurs, then I can't enjoy the beach as much anymore, right? And
Hmm.
so when we have relationships where that feel like spurs and like we're constantly stepping on spurs, then it's hard for us to be comfortable and enjoy the relationship. So I think that was a perfect analogy. And so we have to begin to pay attention to the spurs that we're stepping on when it comes to um, re, even revoking access, right,
Yes.
or reducing access that we've given people in our lives.
Yes. Yes. Because I like because then when I look at, okay, now I need to set a boundary, it is just, I know something needs to happen, right? And for me, it is okay. When we're saying a boundary needs to be set, we can misplace the boundaries to say,
Right.
now I am going to have to put a boundary on the person instead of setting the boundaries for myself to say, okay, now I know this person lies, I know this person cheats, so then I go into that. You're gonna have to stop talking to me like that. You're going to have to stop going out. You're going to have to stop doing. So is everything is about the person having to stop. So that is them putting the boundary on the other person. We can control and manipulate people to say, because I remember once a family member had asked me to if they could stay at my house, and I'm like, okay, I can't trust this person in my house. I can't trust them with a key. I can't trust them with. So I had to say no. I had to set a boundary to say no instead of saying, yeah, you can stay here, but you have to come in at a certain time. You have to do this. There's no this, though. And then start setting boundaries of what they couldn't do in the house, where they couldn't go, so it's like, no. So I had to then place it on myself and just say no versus trying to place it on the other person by setting all of these boundaries that they had to do once they stayed here. So, um, so for me, it's like, no is a complete sentence.
I like that. So, and y'all chime in and identify like where you may have had misplaced boundaries again. And I think as we're talking about this, Melody, I think it's important for us to understand, because you identified I set these boundaries on the other person
Yes.
instead of just really being clear, right, on being clear on my expectations and my rules. I gave them access when I didn't need to give them access, right? So but I want us to look at the fact that sometimes we place boundaries on people as a way to, well, I think that's probably moving a little bit further. That's moving to consequences. So let's talk about the responsibilities, right? When it comes to responsibilities as it relates to boundaries, because I definitely want to talk about this consequences, because I think we have a tendency as people, but wait a minute, I digress. Responsibilities. Let's talk about responsibilities, though, as it relates to
Okay.
boundaries.
So responsibilities for me then would be to what my expectations. So if I give you some information that is between us, and then you have the responsibility to hold that in confidence. When
Awesome.
I share my heart with you, then you have to have the responsibility then of caring or nurturing that heart. If I'm telling you that I'm hurting, and you take it like, oh, she'll get over it, or so it's like, okay, so I'm sharing my hurts and my feelings and being vulnerable, and the other person just like, oh well. So it's like, why do I then keep going to you with that? So being responsible then is to know who I can go to share stuff with, who I can know, who I can trust in relationships. That's for family, for coworkers. So certain things, it's like, you have this responsibility to whatever level that I give you, then you have to be responsible to that same level.
So it sounds to me like there's some accountability that goes with setting boundaries,
Mm-hmm.
right? Giving you access means I'm holding you accountable. I'm holding you accountable. Um, Another thing that I think the council identified is if there's no accountability when I'm given access, it's going to eventually lead to abandonment. And
Mm-hmm.
he doesn't state that the other person will abandon you. He said, well, he says that, but he said, but one of us will leave the relationship. Either you will leave the you'll leave the relationship, or I will. So
Mm-hmm.
one of us are going to end up hurt because we haven't set clear goals, there's not a clear accountability measure that's been put in place.
Yes. Because,
Right.
and then the other part, and I think I really like the consequences thing. When she said boundaries without consequence is a bad suggestion. It's not even, I think the counselor said a mere suggestion, but she was like, no, it's like giving a bad suggestion
Yeah.
because you're saying it, but there is no, well, if you cheat on me one more time, okay, they cheat again. Well, if you tell my business woman, they do it again. So it's really, a bad suggestion. There has to be consequences, and sometimes there are some fears that goes with as to why people don't set the consequences and the boundaries. There is reasons why people don't.
Yeah. Well, so and as you bring up consequences, I wanted to bring up the fact that it doesn't mean you use it as a weapon, because
Yeah.
that's the misunderstanding of boundaries, right? So if you don't do this, then I'm gonna do this, right? So now we're
Hmm.
withdrawing love
Right.
from a person because they aren't doing what we want to do. That's not a boundary,
Right.
right? That's not a boundary. So it's not meant, boundaries are not meant to weaponize, use as weapons for those
Hmm.
individuals that we love. You should be able to show, and they say this too. This is, I love it. They state unconditional love, right?
Yes.
We should be able to give unconditional love and still have put boundaries in place.
Right.
It doesn't mean that I don't love you. It just means that there's some relational access that I probably should have never given you that I gave you.
Hmm.
Right.
Right.
I
Right.
I love my kids to death. But kind of let's go back to the example that you gave about your mama. I'm not giving one. I'm not my younger kids, and we have tried it too. I'm not giving them no credit card to go to the mall and shop with. Mm-mm.
Hmm.
Much
Hmm.
access, right?
Yeah.
Guess what?
Yeah.
It does not mean I do not love them. Andrew, he's a great driver. I put him through multiple classes now, but I'm not gonna leave town and leave him with my car keys either.
Right. Right.
So, right?
Yeah.
Matter of fact, I'm barely gonna let him drive across the street with my car. Although it's
Mm.
probably the best car to let him drive across the street in. His dad gonna use before I will.
Yeah.
There's some level of access that we can't we have to make sure that we are we ourselves, and this is backtracking, we ourselves have to be responsible
Responsible. Right. Right.
with our information.
Instead of having them come up to our level of 10, it's like nope. If they're responsible at a level 3, then we have to give them level 3 access.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
and so the other part in there that she talked about was having a consequence will cost you something,
Hmm.
and it's a price that needs to be paid. It is something, and so that's the reason why sometimes we don't set boundaries, because it's like, okay, you are really treating me, you're verbally abusive, you dismiss my feelings. All of these are happening in a relationship, and then if I set a boundary and say I'm not willing to accept this behavior anymore, then that's putting a boundary on me. And at the same time, a person may be thinking, wait a minute, if I am saying this about a relationship, that person may be the one that's a breadwinner.
Ah, yeah. So
So
I might lose some money.
I
Yeah.
might lose some. So like, where am I going to go if I set this? If I have this bound, or there can be some guilt behind it to say, okay, I know of a person who she was staying in her mother's house, and she was just wrecking the house. The mother was stressed all the time. She was doing drugs in and out, the whole nine yard. And the mother was like, I just can't take it anymore. And so the child's godmother said, well, she's wrecking your house. You really do got to kick her out.
Yeah.
And so when she kicked her out, the young lady ended up getting killed, and the godmother felt guilty. But it was like that was her. We don't want that to happen to that extreme, but that was her choice. And so that is sometimes it's like, okay, they'll be homeless, or they may go out there and do certain things. They may hurt themselves. I'm afraid, all those things. But it is something, a boundary that you place on yourself to say, I will not accept this behavior
So ultimately,
anymore.
so ultimately, you're saying we can suffer the loss of, we can end up suffering the loss of a relationship, the loss of that
Yeah.
person in our lives. It may not be to the extreme of they lose their lives when we set a boundary, but sometimes we lose that relationship because,
Yes.
especially if they're not used to us setting boundaries, guys.
Mm-hmm.
People are so used to you being a people pleaser and doing whatever they want you to do and having full access to whatever in your lives, and you decide to withdraw or reduce access to yourself, then everybody's not going to accept it.
Right.
Which
Right.
is one
Right.
of the reasons why we wanted to do this book, because good boundaries also might mean goodbyes. And I
Goodbyes.
think we're gonna discuss that further. We're gonna be bringing on some guests to kind of understand, identify what does that look like in their lives too.
Mm-hmm.
But for the most part, I think it's important for us to understand that good boundaries are important. And sometimes good boundaries might mean goodbyes.
Goodbye.
Goodbyes.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
this is to help us have those healthy guidelines.
Yeah. And then the other part that she talked about, when we are saying, when we are communicating our good boundaries, it's not telling the other person, you need to stop.
Yep.
You need to stop. Here you're going through, you're checking their phone, you're checking stuff, and you're sneaking and hiding, and you're going through all of this. And it's like, no, it's not whether or not, because if they're going to continue a behavior, it's not for me to control that behavior. And you can't force. And the other part that she talked about was, you can't force a behavior.
Right.
They will probably do it for a little bit, and then you get all excited, and then they'll go back to what's natural to them. And so now you're upset, instead of being able to say, you know what, is this something that I am willing to accept?
Yep.
So if it's not, I'm not saying you got to stop anything.
Right.
The thing of it is, then I need to say, I'm no longer going to accept this.
So it's what you are
And
willing or unwilling. That's
yes,
the thing. You're either willing or unwilling. And when you make that decision, people will not like it. But it's again, it's necessary to communicate that.
yeah.
And it goes back to, I think I may have mentioned it last week, Melanie, the serenity prayer. Remember, I
Mhm.
can't change anybody else,
Right,
but I
right.
can change how I respond and react to situations. And when it comes to me communicating my boundaries, and if my boundaries are healthy and they're appropriate, and again, I have clearly communicated them to you,
Mm-hmm.
then I have to make it.
Face. Right. And the other part that she talked about that I liked was people pleasing. And so we look at, because sometimes we can look at that as like a good Christian trait. I'm just too nice. I'm just, and you're trying to please everybody. But one of the things she brought out was with the people pleasing, it's really not for that other person's benefit. You're getting something out of it. So you might be getting rent paid. You might be getting attention, but it is a benefit to you when you are doing that people pleasing. And the last part that for me, it's like people may not accept your boundaries.
Right.
They may have issue with it. There may be some blowback behind it. But the part that I liked is when she said, I don't need anyone to co-sign my boundaries.
Yeah.
When I set a boundary, I have to have a consequence behind it. And it is what it is. And I have to be able to keep my word and because sometimes it's difficult. And like you said, you may lose a friendship, you may lose a relationship. There may be some tension, or in some cases, because the person really does care, they may naturally change. They may willingly change.
But and let's know that's not your responsibility. Your
Right.
responsibility, you're responsible to your boundaries
Yes.
and to you. And I can't reemphasize that enough. As we end this, Melanie, do you have like a key takeaway that you want people to remember as we move forward into our next chapter even?
For me, my key takeaway in everything is self-reflection and being completely honest with myself, because there are some hard truths that I may not like, but I just have to accept when it's me, or when someone tells me the truth. I have to be able to accept it, and I need to be able to accept when I have to say goodbye. I have to say goodbye.
All right, y'all. So when we come back next week, as we continue on with good boundaries and goodbyes, I want to make sure that you guys are chiming in. What are some questions and concerns that you have as it relates to setting boundaries with people? What are some difficulties that you're having? Y'all chime in, share with us. We want to hear from you, and we also want to hear how this is helping you, and what you don't understand as it relates to setting healthy boundaries, because we're bearing one another's burdens, means we are in this together, but we want to make sure that we are in it in a healthy way. So all right, guys, this has been another episode on good boundaries and goodbyes here on Bob Talk, and we will see you again next week on
Bob Talk.
Bye,
All
everyone.
right. Bye-bye. Oh, shoots.